Hello guys, and welcome to the last video of the semester. In this video we're going to talk about two-dimensional arrays. Two-dimensional arrays are just regular arrays, but they allow us to store and capture more details about the problem that we're trying to solve. So we learned one-dimensional arrays. We learned every cell is actually identified by its own index. And in Java, indices actually are sequential. They start with 0, go all the way up to the size of the array, -1. Now, if you look into two-dimensional arrays, you can see essentially it's a number of one-dimensional arrays stacked on top of each other. So now for each cell, it's not enough to have only one index to define the exact cell. We need two indices, namely the row number and then the column number. So for example, this cell is actually identified by row number 0, column number 0. This one, row number 0, column number 1, and so on and so forth. So now basically with two-dimensional arrays, we can solve like more problems, and some of the problems you really need to use two-dimensional arrays in order for you to solve the problems efficiently. So let's learn how we can define two-dimensional arrays in Java. Again, the concept here is really very similar to one-dimensional arrays, even in the syntax. So for example, imagine I'm storing grades for students. So the way we did this so far was int. Imagine if this is an integer array, grades is going to be something like 1, 2, and 3. So now this is only one-dimensional, but imagine now basically I'm storing, I have 2 students, and then each student has 3 grades. So 2 students, 3 grades for each. So essentially for this one, what we're going to do for grades, let me just take that. So the change here is we need to add one pair of square brackets to the definition, and now we're saying this is an integer two-dimensional array called grades. Now essentially, if you look into a one-dimensional array, every element is just basically a primitive type. It's an integer in this case. So for two-dimensional array, we need to make each one of these an array by itself. So you're going to have an array here, an array here, and then another array here. So essentially, you will have an array where you will end up with, in this case, you'll have 3 rows, and then whatever number of columns you will have. So in this case, what we have is we have 2 students, 3 grades for each. Because it's 2 students, we need to actually remove 1. So we end up with 2 rows, 1 row and then another row. And then for here we'll have 3 grades. So basically some grade, comma, and then another grade, another comma for the 3rd grade. And essentially this is what we will have. So now to make it simple, imagine we have something like 10, 20, 30, and then 40, 50, and 60. So now we have 2 rows. This is the first row, second row, and then 3 columns for every row. Column 1, column 2, column 3, and then column 1, column 2, column 3. But this is actually for the second row. So literally, if we want to actually kind of like draw how this would look, it's just going to be 10, 20, 30, and then the second row will have 40, 50, and 60. So now, let me just put the charger. So now, if we want to iterate over our arrays, all what we need to do is just basically use a for loop. And then the for loop is going to be, like at index, let's say 0, we need to do kind of like inner for loop because you need nested for loop. So the inner for loop is just going to go 0, 1, and 2. And then basically once it's done, the row is just going to actually also be incremented. And then basically for this new row, we're going to iterate over this column, this column, this column. So 0, 1, and 2. So let's actually look how that's going to look like. So let's actually print the content of the array. So you need for int I is 0, I is less than, in this case, how many? It's 2 rows, so it's just going to be less than 2. So 0 and 1, and then I plus plus, and then we need, so this is for a row, and then the inner for loop is just going to be for the column. So for int j is 0, j is less than 3, because we have 3 columns, so 0, 1, and 2. And j plus plus, let's actually just to print the content. So it's out. Now to print it, we called it the grades of index I, and then basically j for the column. Now let's actually just print it like in a better way, so not including new lines, and let's just have a print line here. So we're gonna move to a new line. Let's see what we're printing. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. And that's exactly what we wanted. So really the concept is very similar to one-dimensional arrays, but essentially the difference now is you need both indices, one to keep track of the row, one to keep track of the column. Okay, so notice now in the nested for loop, the way it's going to work is for each I, basically the inner for loop is going to iterate over every single value of j. So basically we'll have 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, and then I gets incremented, so I becomes 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, and then I also gets incremented. So basically we have actually I is not going to be incremented in this case because I is going to be less than 2, but you get the point. Always, if you are in doubt of what's happening and what's the current values in your printouts, just to print them out and see what values you get. So this will give you an idea of what's happening. Okay, so one thing I would like to do for this one, kind of like combining what we learned last time with this content. So I will define an array list for the two students. Okay, so let me define array list. So it's just gonna be array list of a string. Let's call them names. New array list of a string, and then I need to import the array list. So now I need, remember this is a type, so it has to be a class type. In this case, it's a string. So it's going to be names dot add. So it's a string like Mike, and then I need to add another student, Sally. So let me actually now do like print kind of like the name. So let's say do as out. So just to print and for this one, because we used array list, although you could use an array, but I just wanted to display one more example for you guys. So it's just gonna be names dot get index is just gonna be I. So it's just gonna print it, and then let's actually just add to this some like space, so we see what we have. So you have Mike, here are the grades for Mike, and then basically Sally, here are the grades for Sally. And then once you are able to do this, basically you can do a lot of things. So let's say you want to calculate the sum for each one. So for example, for each I, we have to go through over the whole j and then keep track of the sum, which means that I need to define a variable called, for instance, like total 0, And then every time when I'm in this for loop, I need to take this value and then add it to total. So it's just going to be total equal total plus this one. And then once I'm out of the for loop, I can actually display something like total is total. Let's see what we get. So now total is 60, and then if you want something like, you know, just add some spaces. So total is 60, total is 150, and that's what we wanted. And you can do all sorts of things with this one, depending on the problem you're trying to solve. And notice here, two-dimensional arrays really make sense because you can look at each inner array. In this case, would represent multiple grades for a single student. Now, if you want to use one-dimensional array, it's not really very intuitive to think of the problem using only one-dimensional array. But with two-dimensional arrays, it's more like uh, the way to go. Okay, so hope that makes sense, guys, and I hope that was helpful. Um, I'll be posting a new assignment for you guys soon, and that's going to be the last assignment for the semester. Okay, have a good one, and bye bye.